Okay, we are on chapter 2 in-class exercises, and this is going to be number 6. So it looks like they're asking us to put together a schedule of cost of goods manufactured. So we have purchases of raw materials, indirect materials incurred in the manufacturing overhead, direct labor, manufacturing overhead applied to work in process, under applied overhead, and then we have all our inventory, so raw materials, work in process, and finished goods. So what's the first thing we're going to do with our direct materials? We are going to start with our raw materials, inventory, beginning balance. So we see it here, beginning balance, 12,000. Okay, what's the next thing we're going to have? We're going to add our purchases of raw materials. For 30,000. So now we have total raw materials available for sale is 42,000. So what are we going to have to subtract? So we're going to subtract out our ending inventory balance, which is given 18,000. So it's right here, raw materials ending inventory. And so now we're going to have the raw materials used in production. So then what are we going to have to add? We're going to have to add, subtract indirect materials included in manufacturing overhead. Indirect materials included in manufacturing overhead. So we're going to have to include those in there. So we're going to subtract, figure out what our total direct materials were. After direct materials, so we always have direct materials, then we always have direct labor. So how much is our direct labor? So that's a given, so that's 58,000. And then our last item is manufacturing overhead. Manufacturing overhead applied to work in process inventory. So that's here. Manufacturing overhead applied to work in process, that's going to be 87,000. So we now have our total manufacturing costs. Okay, so we know what our direct materials, our direct labor, and overhead gives us our total manufacturing costs. So now what do we have to do? We're going to have to add in our beginning work in process inventory. What was our balance there? 56,000. Gives us a balance of 220. Okay. So then what are we going to have to subtract? Our ending work in process inventory. And so that one is a given too. How much is that? It's going to be 65,000. So we're going to subtract that out. So now we have our total cost of goods manufactured. So this is our schedule of cost of goods manufactured. Basically what we're doing is we're taking all of the components of the raw materials to work in process to figure out what moved to finished goods. Okay, so we'll just check our work just to make sure. I think that's right. Yes, okay. So our next step is to prepare a schedule of cost of goods sold. So we're going to start with our finished goods inventory, our beginning balance, which is 35,000. And what are we going to add? So we're going to add the cost of goods manufactured, which we just calculated. See, cost of goods manufactured, cost of goods manufactured. So it's going to be 155,000. So now we know how much we have available for sale. So we have 190,000 available for sale. But what are we going to have to subtract? Our finished goods inventory, our ending balance. Let's see, 42,000. So we have our unadjusted cost of goods sold. What do you think's missing? We have our under applied overhead. we're going to have to add that back in to get a true cost of goods sold number. It's 4,000. So our adjusted cost of goods sold, adjusted after adjusting for our under applied overhead, is going to be 152,000. Just check our work. And we are all good. We'll just score this question and do 2.7. So we have to figure out our under-applied or over-applied manufacturing overhead for the period. Okay, so what information do we have? So we know that Osborne Manufacturing uses a predetermined overhead rate of $18.20 per direct labor hour. The predetermined overhead rate was based on a formula that estimates $218,400 of total manufacturing overhead for an estimated activity level of 12,000 direct labor hours. So the company incurred actual total manufacturing overhead costs of $215,000 and 11,500 total direct labor hours during the period. So I think I'm going to get our Excel out. Let's see if I have this here. Right. So first thing we're going to do is determine the amount of under-applied or over-applied manufacturing overhead. So how much was incurred? How much manufacturing overhead was incurred? So this is going to be actual. So we're going to put in 215,000. So we know our actual direct labor hours again, right? Times our predetermined overhead rate. So this is where we're using estimates. So we had 1820. And so our applied manufacturing overhead was 209,300. But our actual overhead was 215,000. So we know that our overhead was under-applied because the amount that actually came in was less than what we had applied. So we're going to have to adjust. Oh, it's under-applied by, what was our number? 5,700. Assuming the entire amount of the under-applied or over-applied overhead is closed out to cost of goods sold, what would the effect of the under-applied overhead or over-applied overhead on the company's gross margin be? So the manufacturing overhead is under-applied, so that means the cost of goods sold would increase by 5,700, so which means the gross margin would decrease by that same amount. 5,700. Oh, and it looks like I put an extra number in here. 5,700. So let's just, well, we'll just score this question because I think those are the right answers. Right. So that is the review of the in-class exercises for Chapter 2, 1 through 7.